Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast is presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more.
This is something that is I'm really excited about, working with this staff, working with these players. Every year's new. Every year's new. That's the way the NFL's set up. You know, if you look at all the rules of the NFL, whether it's free agency, the draft, the salary cap rules, whatever it is, every year's a new year, and that's what this is. And so we're all starting with a clean slate, fresh start, and it's really not anything about what's gone on in the past. It's more about moving forward. That's our theme. That's one of our themes on offense is to move forward. You know, that's what we're doing.
That, ladies and gentlemen, was Bill O'Brien speaking during Access at Gillette Stadium pre-draft. We got coaches, we got director of player personnel, Matt Groh, and we got intel to share with you. Featuring Phil Perry, this is the Patriots Talk podcast. And Phil, what was your main takeaway today? Because mine was really that sound from Bill O'Brien trying to set the tone for what 2023 will be all about, which is nothing to do with 2022.
Yeah, I loved his quote today where he said, every year in the NFL is the same in that they are all different. That was very sort of like deep philosophical sort of assessment by him, where he's just trying to convey the message in 100 different ways that it's a new year and we've all got new challenges to face, new things that we need to embrace to make sure that we are where we need to be when the season rolls around here. So I honestly didn't think we got a ton of real meat today, Tom, but that was the clear message, was we're moving on. We're turning the page.
Can they truly wipe the slate clean, though? I mean, you can talk all you want about clean slates, but there is an end point to 2023, whether it was for a player who closed the season really well in terms of performance, attitude, attendance, whatever. Everything carries over. You don't just show up and have the slate wiped clean to the point where, okay, everyone starts at zero. You know, Hunter Henry is not going to be competing with Matt Stuber or Andy Stuber. Is he even a friggin' tight end?
No, he's Andrew Stuber is a tackle.
Yeah. So Matt, yeah, it's not going to happen. You have a pecking order. You have things that you accomplished last year, things that you did that carry forward, negative and positive. So this, I guess, is probably an important month for Mac Jones to show how much he's wiped it clean. It'll probably also be interesting for Mac Jones to sniff around how the Patriots are treating him in terms of getting a vibe for, okay, is the slate truly clean?
Yeah, I wonder how he might be able to find that out. It feels like it's one of those things, Tom, where you might not really know, and this is the case in a lot of different scenarios in that building. You don't really know where you stand until it comes to the first practice or the first team period or the first game of the season. I mean, I've talked to players who think back to the competition there was at quarterback in 2021 between Cam Newton and Mac Jones. And some of them will tell you, we didn't know it was a competition until Cam ended up missing time because of COVID protocols, and Mac, basically tore our first team defense up in the 2-minute drill. That's when people started to look at each other and say, this guy's actually going to be our starter, isn't he? So I think it might be hard for him to tell, and it might keep everybody a little bit on edge, but that's sort of how they function there.
It's kind of what they embrace. It was interesting. I asked Bill O'Brien about how good Mac can be. Let's play the noise from that. How good can Mac Jones be?
You know, I think, Tom, the big thing for us right now is everybody's starting with a clean slate. You know, I think that every year is different. I think this year is no different than any other year relative to each year in the NFL is different, right? So what you did in the past, or whether it's a player or a coach or anybody in the organization, really has no bearing on what happens moving forward. So, we just started yesterday, and we're looking forward to having a good phase 1 and then a good phase 2 and then a good phase 3, and that's kind of what it's all about.
So no ceiling? All right, so Billy, clearly not really enticed by the conversation about, there's limitless potential here, which in some ways is telling too. I mean, he didn't do it with any player. I don't think he was really asked specifically about any player where we can draw a conclusion, okay, well, he didn't say this about this guy and he did say this about that guy. but they're not lobbing bouquets at this juncture.
Certainly not. And I think they're going to continue to embrace the competitive spirit that is in some ways defined this team for a long time. Matt Groh actually alluded to that during his press conference, but I think, if they think, the players think there's going to be a competition for any of their jobs, quarterback included, they being the coaching staff, they probably like that, Tom. They probably want people to be a little bit uncomfortable right now.
What's it take for Bailey Zappe to beat Mac Jones out? I was on the radio last week on WEEI and said that would have to come by knockout, which is what I said about Cam and Mac a couple of years ago. And despite what some people were reporting coming out of the practices, he did win by knockout. You agreed with that as well. So I would think that has to happen again.
I agree. I think Bailey Zappe probably have to blow Mac Jones away. Listen, I understand their opinion on draft status is it doesn't matter how you get here. It's what you do once you've been here. I don't believe them when they say that. I think draft status does matter. I think there's a reason N'Keal Harry got as many opportunities as he did. Isaiah Wynn got as many opportunities as he did. These guys are first-round picks. They want these guys to succeed. It can be harder for a guy like Jacoby Myers, for instance, who struggled at times in his second year. Even after showing he could play as a rookie, he struggled to get on the field because he was undrafted. That's my take on that.
Mm-hmm.
So that matters. I think the owner's opinion, Tom, has to matter to a degree. I don't know if Bill Belichick was on this podcast with us right now. He might scoff at us and say, yeah, you might think that, but not my football program. But he's been so out in the open with his support for Mac Jones. It would be odd to me if they were, for instance, splitting first team reps. And if things don't necessarily go great for Mac Jones early, all of a sudden it's Bailey Zappe's team. That I just can't envision that.
Yeah. And again, by knockout. I mean, you can say, okay, Bailey had a good practice this day and he looked great at this mini camp, which is going to be an exercise we're involved in, a fruitless one in the very near future. But we will diligently report completions and efficiencies, not to, downgrade what we're going to do. But what will matter will be the joint practices and when the reps are getting split up in August. But you asked Bill O'Brien, and we're going to get to some of the Gerard Mayo sound and also Matt Groh on a few different areas too with the draft. But you asked Bill O'Brien about multiple play callers, easy there, Elmer Fudd. And here's what he had to say.
Specifically for Mac, do you have to be cognizant of the challenge that might be associated with having three different coordinators, three different play callers in 3 years, and maybe trying to mitigate whatever those challenges are for him?
I think that goes for really every player in there. I really do. I think, a lot of these guys have had different coaches over their careers, whether it's, quarterbacks or, the running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, offensive line. So I think it's more about them getting to know us getting to know them, our styles, what we believe in, what we're passionate about within the framework of what Bill wants the team to look like. So I think that's kind of what we started yesterday, and that's really what we're working towards right now.
Phil, did you find that illuminating?
Not really, but did you? I don't know. Listen, I think he's not wrong, right? Every player at every level, college or pro, you're dealing with changes oftentimes in some way, shape, or form. It's just, I think even Bill O'Brien would admit it's not ideal for a young quarterback to have his hand held through 3 different seasons by 3 different chiefs on the offensive side of the ball, 3 different play callers, 3 different offenses, maybe. What I think is going to happen, Tom, and you tell me if you feel differently, they're probably going to go back to a language that Bill O'Brien recalls from his time here in New England that Josh McDaniels was using. And maybe, the approach is a little bit different than the one that Josh McDaniels took. And maybe there's some more RPOs. Bill O'Brien spent half his coaching career in college. He understands the RPO game. That wasn't part of what Josh McDaniels did or wanted to do, really. So there'll be some tweaks. But I think he has to be aware of the fact that, okay, if we really change things up on him for the 3rd time in as many years, diminishing returns at that position.
No doubt. It fascinates me. Albert Breer mentioning last week that there's an offensive overhaul in in progress. And Bill O'Brien, I asked him about the framework of the offense and what it looked like. Kind of an okay answer. Let's run it. You guys can determine whether you thought this was an okay answer or not.
What's the framework of the 2023 offense, the framework of it? I mean, they tweaked it a bit last year. It was obviously Josh's offense and your offense for a long period of time.
Yep.
Do you have a framework in place, or is it just kind of like sketched?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a framework, and every year there's a different framework. Like when I was answering the last question, you go back and you look at your experiences that you've had in different places, different experiences that some of these guys on the staff here have had, and you develop that framework. But at the end of the day, it's really like it started yesterday. And part of putting that framework together is working with the players, and that's what we're doing. We started yesterday. It's been good. It's a 3-phase off-season program, and we'll begin to put all that together now, and then that leads into training camp.
So there is some stuff that might right now be in the framework. You think, it's not really something that.
Yeah, I wouldn't I think it would be crazy for me to stand up here and tell you what we're doing offensively. So I think I'll just stick with that previous answer.
So when I say framework, what do I mean? They might have a totally different definition that would probably be more germane to the whole conversation, but I'm thinking, okay, this is our language. This is what we're calling our protections. This is what we're going to emphasize, the same way they emphasized wide zone runs. We spent so much time listening to them say, well, we've always had these in there. Okay, but you weren't calling them as much. You took shots down the field. Well, we always do. Well, you did it more. You emphasized it. So I wonder what these emphases will be in 2023. Are they going to get back to more of what the Patriots did under Josh McDaniels? Are they going to kind of meld what Bill O'Brien's language is with what was installed last year? I mean, last year, again, the ripple effect, it's hard to just say that a new broom sweeps clean when they changed stuff in addition to having substitute teachers in there. It's like they rearranged the friggin' room. They're still looking for things that were put away by the long-term subs. And everybody got dumber.
Can I just mention one thing that just came to me as you were talking there? I think one thing that Bill Belichick, I think, will always want on the offensive side of the ball, even though he's a defensive guy, is he will want, because he wants this on defense too. He wants to meld the scheme to the personnel that he has. So I think in some way we can already look at the personnel. Now, maybe they get some sort of game-changing player in the draft here. I guess we'll see in about a week. But you can look at the personnel that they have and see Hunter Henry, Juju Smith-Schuster, Mike Gesicki, Kendrick Bourne, I would throw into this mix as well. Ramondre Stevenson as a capable pass catcher himself, and say, man, it really looks like they're going to try to hammer the middle of the field. Mm-hmm. And really short with Stevenson and Juju Smith-Schuster, maybe even Hunter Henry, intermediate with Kendrick Bourne and Hunter Henry, and deep, I would say Gesicki really, and this is the vibe that I've gotten from defensive coaches that I've spoken to, they see Gesicki as a true vertical middle of the field weapon for the Patriots to be able to use. So I think they'll kind of get back to that, Tom. I think they'll want to be what they've been for a long, long time. I'm not sure it's going to be the trying to be explosive outside the numbers like they were early last year. I think it could be get the ball out quickly, take your vertical shots when they're there, use play action, that sort of thing, the sort of thing that we're accustomed to seeing here.
When you think about it, it was a fun exercise. It was fun to see against the Ravens, Devontae Parker catch 5 balls on 10 targets for 143 yards. But that's like just going driver on every hole. I mean, and the guy's not a big hitter off the tee. It just play to the strength. Be that as it may. Sticking with Bill O'Brien a bit and melding it with Matt Groh, this is what Matt had to say about using Bill O'Brien as a resource in draft conversations.
Certainly through free agency, whether it was through his draft prep with the Texans, and then, here the last couple of years at Alabama, knows those players very, very well. And then he's in the SEC where there's a lot of good players. So, to be able to pick his brain on certain things. Look, I certainly don't have all the answers. trying to find out as much information about these guys going into the draft as we can. And Coach O'Brien, you know, he's a wealth of knowledge and has been a really, really good, you know, friend and resource for myself.
Well, that's good to hear, right? Get a guy who was in the SEC, got a guy who was around the college game, got a guy who knows everybody at Alabama. It's good intel he's going to be able to provide, and the Patriots are going to solicit it.
Yes, I would agree. And the more trusted opinions, to me, the better. You know, I am very much in the camp of with something like the draft, the more the merrier. Wisdom of the masses, you know, tends to prevail. If you are going to go against the grain because you think you know better than everybody else, with something like the draft, yes, every once in a while you'll get that hit, that guy that got way, quote unquote, overdrafted and ends up being a great player. But it seems like more often than not, people that look at these things closely and they look at the quote unquote consensus board of all the mock drafts across the country, and they try to do their rankings based on all those opinions, and they slot them in and they play it out. They give it a couple years. Usually more opinions tend to drive better answers and better results. And so if you can drop a really valuable opinion into what they already have in the mix there in Foxborough, I would say that's a good thing.
Did you take anything away from Matt Groh and said, wow, that's a bit of intel I didn't expect to get?
There are a couple things, I think. You know, it was interesting to hear him talk specifically about Zay Flowers, who's a player that we've talked a lot about on the Next Pats podcast, and making sure that people knew that, you know, he's not going to be typecast as an inside player. He thinks he can do a little bit more than that. I thought that was interesting as somebody that I think could be a Patriots fit, maybe not at 14 overall, but maybe a little bit later in the first round if they want to trade down. I really wanted to get some intel on him on the tackle position, and maybe we did in a roundabout sort of way. I asked him just how confident he was in that spot, and he basically said, well, we got a couple guys. He wasn't necessarily glowing about what they have there. And that's a position, again, first round, that I think we all think could be on their radar.
Yeah. And I tried to probe on corners, which is basically, I said, is there anybody who can have a Sauce Gardner-esque impact or even approach what he does, approximate the impact? And he said, yeah, well, he didn't say he wasn't useless on it. He did say that there's plenty of talent there, but he just, you know, said they're all going to want to make a big impact. Okay.
I did find it interesting, you know, he didn't push back on when I asked him about if they want to continue to try to be a fast team. That was very obviously an emphasis last year. And he got to the podium after the fact. He said, hey, if you want to be a fast team, you better draft fast guys. We want to be fast. We drafted fast guys. You know, Cole Strange is fast for his position. Marcus Jones, Tyquan Thornton, those are their first three picks.
Roll the fast talk from today, if you could, Skull Crusher.
Matt, I remember you saying last year during the draft, I think it was after the second night of the draft, you know, you felt like you guys got faster. You guys, you know, three great athletes in those first three picks. And I think you said something along the lines of, if you want to have a fast team, you better draft fast guys. How important is speed and continuing that trend for you guys moving forward as you continue to build your team?
Yeah, I don't think you can be fast enough. I don't think that there's a team in this league that's saying, oh, we got enough. Like, if they can get faster, they're going to get faster. When you lose a fast guy, you say, that's a lot of speed we just lost. How are we going to replace that? So, look, we want to get tougher. We want to get faster. Sometimes you got to find that balance. Ideally, you find it in the same guy. Doesn't always happen that way. But you want to get faster, draft fast guys. You want to get bigger, stronger. You know, that's what you got to do. You can't really think that the guy's going to come in here and you're going to have a magic wand and all of a sudden you're going to make them faster or bigger or stronger. So, you know, just really trying to get to know these players as well as we can and know what they're going to do and know what they are and not ask them to do things that they're not going to succeed at.
So I just found that interesting. You know, will that be the focus again? You know, I think it could be, Tom. Would they really dramatically shift gears from one year to the next? I mean, if they decided before the draft last year that they wanted to get much faster and be a fast team, they're looking at their team now. Do they say we're fast enough? No, it sounds like it's the opposite based on his answer today. So maybe we should be looking at the elite of the elite when it comes to 40 times, because that's kind of what they did last year, is they just focused on the fastest guys they could get and they went and got them.
And final thing I'll use here from Matt Groh is the contracts and having to be wary of the number of expiring contracts. We've talked about that on this particular pod, and Matt reiterates it, but better to hear from him than some, bespectacled clown in his front room.
What did you learn going through the process in this role last year that maybe that you can apply this year that would help you that you didn't know last year?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm learning things, every day. There's so many nuances to the CBA and all that. Really, just as far as player evaluation, that hasn't changed for me. At a certain point, you learn you got to stick with your gut. You may change a grade, on a guy because, as a young scout, you don't have that kind of conviction. Here at a certain point, you've seen enough players, you kind of have a better idea as to what works and what doesn't. Look, that doesn't always work out 100%. I'll go back to the I don't have all the answers here, but we're working hard, and I would say a big part of that is trying to narrow down not just what I think, but what other people think, and really, focus on the collaborative process. And that's been great with, working with Elliot and Cam and all the area scouts and the national scouts to try and, have a consensus. When we have a consensus on a player, that's when you start feeling pretty good about things.
All right, we're 10 days out from the draft. Phase 1 of OTAs is starting up, and it's been an eventful offseason. Part of this offseason, of course, was the news around Jerod Mayo, who was courted by the Browns and the Panthers, said, I'm sticking around. The Patriots made clear that they wanted Jerod to stay here, and he will be staying here. What did you glean from Mayo's time with us?
I would just say that he made it pretty apparent that he wants to be here for the next few years. And I think we'll see after that. I would be surprised, Tom, if he was here like for 5 years without, sniffing around some other head coaching opportunities if he got those.
Mm-hmm.
If Bill Belichick is still coaching, 5 years from now. One of the things that's sort of interesting about him is the fact that he doesn't have a title, and he spoke about that today too. He's still comfortable with Steve Belichick calling the plays. They've been pretty good since 2019, since Steve's been calling the plays back in 2019. So he's very open about that. Him not having a title in some ways gives him more mobility if he wants it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He can leave for any upgrade in title anywhere else. If he was a DC here, for instance, and he got a DC offer somewhere else, the Patriots could block that. I know that he just sort of re-upped with them, and it seems like he wants to stay long term. But if something happens where he doesn't feel like he's getting the growth or the opportunities that he needs here, that's sort of an interesting facet to all this. The fact that I think he's still just a linebackers coach, technically, that gives him a little bit of wiggle room to be able to find other opportunities elsewhere if he really wants to do that.
Yeah, and he also was open about the idea that he was included in some of the interviews for offensive coordinator. He was involved. He has been shown more things than he was previously. To what end? We don't know. At whose behest? We don't know. We know the owner wanted it. Did Bill want to do all that? I would imagine to a degree. I've theorized many times that Jerod is an extension of Bill, beginning from the time he was drafted on through now. They've had now a 16-year relationship together. So to me, Jerod would be an extension of Bill and carry forward whatever Bill was doing. But, the inclusion in these things and Jerod's stated interest in being a head coach, ultimately, all roads lead to, is this the successor, which we were not going to uncover today in mid-April, the day after the marathon. But it's going to be an interesting year. It's going to be an interesting year on the Bill front, on the Mac front, on the Mayo front, on the Bill O'Brien front, on the ownership front, and obviously on the standings front. I mean, are they going to win games? I continue to be somebody who thinks the New England Patriots are going to be a playoff team. Mac Jones will be the comeback player of the year, and Jack Jones will have 7 picks.
Whoa.
You heard it here first.
Those are warm. All of those.
I'm exhausted from actually having to leave the house to talk to people today. feel like I ran the marathon myself. Anything else to add? You look like you're doing the brow furrow.
Did anybody ask Mayo if he's going to be in the draft room? He might not even know that yet, but that's something I would actually be kind of interested in.
No. I talked to Troy Brown. I'll have some of that stuff. Troy Brown, Adrian Clem, Steve Belichick, Brian Belichick, Mayo, and Bill O'Brien when I do a story and sit down and start pecking it out from today's Access. Phil, thanks for being with us. Skull Crusher, thanks for turning it around. We'll talk to you folks later in the week.